Hey guys, Political Junkie 2414 here, and welcome to my updated prediction for the 2024 Senate elections as of April 2023. At the time I'm recording this, it is April 2nd, 2023. And before we get started, first of all, I am so sorry that these videos go on so long, and I'm jinxing myself here because or I'm not helping myself here because I am literally pointing out that this takes a while. It takes a while for me to get going, and in the future I'm going to try to speed that up. But I don't really think it matters until we hit maybe the 2 month mark, 1 month mark, away from the election, which we're pretty far away from. But just wanted to say that I'm going to try to make these videos shorter. At least in the future, this one might be 40 minutes long. You never know. But before we get into it, I want to say a couple things. First of all, I'm sorry, guys, about the April Fool's video. It was a joke. Jim Justice has not announced if he's running for Senate. I didn't talk to him. I am not, a Republican. I am not, super, I'm not a big fan of, injecting my opinions into my analysis videos, although at times I do. But I just wanted to, make sure that I acknowledge that. I sent out a community post if you guys haven't seen it yet. And I also put a comment down here said, "Don't be fooled by the date. This is 100% fact." I was trying to stick to the facade, but I was also kind of saying, "Hey, look at the date. I'm fooling you." So yeah, and hopefully you guys didn't get too freaked out, and I'll show you the community post here. I think one of you commented on it. Yeah, my Jim Justice video was an April Fool's joke. I'm not a supporter of justice for Senate, Mansion 2024. And I think some of you guys, I can understand how you guys got freaked out. That's the point of an April Fool's joke. April Fool's videos to freak you out. I remember Let's Talk Elections a couple years ago made a video on April Fool's Day about Joe Manchin switching to the Republican Party, and it was so believable. And I wanted to I actually believed it for a day or two, and I was confused why Wikipedia wasn't updating Manchin's profile. Why wasn't there any news story about it? But it turns out that that was just a joke, and that wasn't actually what the big deal. That Manchin hadn't switched to a Democrat, being a Republican. So, yeah, and I just kind of wanted to take part in the fact that it was April Fool's Day. Saw a lot of other political YouTubers doing a similar thing. So, yes, I just wanted to get that out of the way. So sorry about that, guys. I will, put out, I guess I wasn't clear enough. In the future, I will, in, the following years, I'll put out some more, like definitive statements or or clearer statements, I guess is the right way to put it. Okay, so we're already 3 minutes into the video. Let's get started by talking about the prediction. We're going to be filling out these safe Democratic and Republican states. These states, and I do my predictions by margin. So the safe states will go to either party by over 15%. Some of them might be on the border between safe and likely. But some of the but you never know. Margins are not as important as predicting the actual election, and I think safe is a good way to knock out some of these states that don't really need a lot of mentioning or a lot of attention, like Wyoming. John Barrasso is easily going to win there unless he somehow retires, and maybe there'd be a interesting primary there, like Liz Cheney could run, but there's like a 0% chance of that happening. Indiana, there's an open Senate seat there. uh, Jim Banks looks like he's going to win the GOP nomination, although some. He could get challenged by the incumbent governor Eric Holcomb, who has expressed interest in the race. Maybe Trey Hollingsworth, a former congressman, decides to jump in the race too. But at the end of the day, Banks has the Trump endorsement. Indiana's a right trending state; is very Trumpy, very Republican, the most Republican state pretty much in the Rust Belt. So yeah, there's no chance the Democrats win that. North Dakota was competitive in 2018 with Heidi Heitkamp as the incumbent Democrat, but she lost by a lot for an incumbent, although she, did respectably well. She lost by 11 in North Dakota. Trump won this state by 36, so good on her, but again, it was a blue wave, so I kind of would have expected more. And, without, now for a Republican incumbent, no reason why that would not be a safe margin. Also, Nebraska, the reason why there is a little circle here means that there are two elections in Nebraska. Pete Ricketts is the running in the special election after he got appointed to fill Ben Sass's Senate seat after Sass resigned. Ricketts might face a primary challenge by Charles Herbster, who would be a weak candidate. He's the guy who ran against Jim Pillen for governor last year. He was endorsed by Trump, but he lost the primary probably because he was alleged to have had sexual there were allegations of him sexually assaulting women. There were a lot of people who came out against him after that, and I think that really cost him the primary. So maybe an appointed incumbency is not the same as elected incumbency. Ricketts has never won election to the Senate. He's won election to the governor's race or the governor's mansion, and he came from there to here in the Senate. So, who knows what happens, but either way, Nebraska is a safe red state. Utah also could be interesting. Mitt Romney could face, an interesting primary challenge, but it's Utah. It's a traditionalist Republican state. Wouldn't put too much, bank into something happening there. California, with the safe blue states, I'll just point out a couple. California, Dianne Feinstein's retiring. A lot of different candidates are going to come into this race. Eventually, at the end of the day, I think it'll be a Democrat versus a Democrat given California's primary system. It could easily be a Democrat versus a Republican, but either way, it's going to be safe blue. I think Katie Porter right now is the favorite, but Adam Schiff could definitely take it away. Not worth, not the most competitive Senate race, although it will be an interesting primary. Maryland, Ben Cardin could retire. I think, he might, I think he's going to announce his plans soon. It was supposed to be by the end of March, but, we still haven't gotten word. Yeah, if he doesn't run, maybe Jamie Raskin or someone else enters the race. Either way, Maryland's safe blue. Not much happening there. Delaware, Tom Carper could retire, but not a lot to talk about there. Although Republicans did kind of do well there, so maybe it'd be likely if he doesn't run. New Jersey, Bob Menendez is not very popular, but I think it doesn't really make too much sense for me to put it in the likely category, even if it might be under 15%. I think Menendez, kind of there doesn't really seem to be a lot of opposition to him. It really doesn't seem like Republicans are going to try to beat him really that much. And I think with Biden on the ticket, that makes New Jersey a little bit less prone to being, a little weird. He'll underperform Biden. And New Jersey has been kind of showing some warning signs for Democrats. They've been having pretty bad election results there over the last couple of years. They almost lost the governor's mansion in 2021. They did, relatively, poorly in the, House elections, although better than expected. So New Jersey may be likely, but not really worth talking about. Vermont and Maine, these are two independents who caucus with the Democrats. Bernie might not run again in Vermont, but even then, it's a safe blue state, and he's an independent who caucuses with Dems. He's very progressive. You guys know Bernie. He'll be, either way, Vermont's staying blue. Maine could fall to likely if Angus King retires, but honestly, right now, it looks like he's going to. If he doesn't, maybe we'll get Sarah Gideon, Shelley Pingree, or Jared Golden. I think Golden is, probably wouldn't run. I think I find him as someone who would not want to run. When or would not want to give up his seat. And honestly, for strategically, it would not be a good move. Considering Democrats are going to want to win the majority in 2 years. But yeah. So that is it. Oh, and Minnesota. We haven't even gotten to the likely states, but I'll just say Minnesota. Amy Klobuchar will do a little bit worse than she did in 2018, but she'll still outrun Biden by a fair bit, a noticeable bit. So yeah, that is all I want to talk about with the safe states. Now we're going to get into the likely states that'll be decided by between 5 to 15 points. They're not. Some of them are not super competitive. Some of them are close to being super competitive. But others, are pretty close to being safe. New Mexico, our first likely Democratic state. Martin Heinrich, he's a decent incumbent. New Mexico's a pretty blue state nowadays. The Hispanic shifts, there could be some Hispanic shifts that hurt Democrats here, but they do better in New Mexico with New Mexican Hispanics than they do, nationwide. So, and Heinrich, he won by a lot in 2018, but that was really because the libertarian candidate Gary Johnson, who also ran for president twice, I think he took a lot of votes away from the Republicans, and probably some from the Democrats. So Heinrich, he'll probably run fairly even with Biden, maybe do better by a point or two. You never know. With New Mexico, it's a very interesting state to look at politically, but overall, not a very competitive Senate race. So yeah, Virginia, this could be safe with Tim Kaine. He's a pretty popular incumbent. Glenn Youngkin, I'm getting less and less confident every day that he's going to run. I really don't. I think he could run for Senate against Warner in 2026. I think that is more likely than running against Kane. Youngkin's only 2 years into his term. He hasn't really teased it that much. I think Hung Kao, the Republican who took on Jennifer Wexton in 2022 and, did pretty well. He only lost by 6 points in a Biden plus 19 district. He's thinking about running. I think is the most likely candidate. And if he does, he probably, he'd do relatively well. He'd do better than, Kane's opponent in 2018, but he'd still lose by a lot. I think Kane, really takes a lot of Cow's opportunity out. I think Kane just in general is a decent incumbent, not very charismatic, but former governor, good candidate. Don't really see much of an issue with him getting reelected. I think he takes a lot of the, you know, opportunity out of this race for Republicans, even though federally Virginia is a blue state. I think also part of the reason why Cow did so well in his House race was because Virginia is more Republican down ballot. If you look at the 2020 House elections in the state, Biden or House Democrats only won the popular vote by a couple of points. And they didn't do much worse in 2022. So yeah, that is it for Virginia. Pennsylvania, there's like a snowball's chance in hell that Bob Casey doesn't run because of his cancer, but I haven't really seen much of the news about his cancer. It's seemed, I assume that he's doing well. Really all of the attention for Pennsylvania recently in terms of, the United States senators has been on John Fetterman, who's, looks like he's going to return from the hospital next week. Week after next. I'm, praying for him. I hope that he, is doing well. And actually, I don't know if it's the week after next. It's the 17th, I think. The week of the 17th is when he is supposed to return. Hopefully, that he comes back to the Senate to do his, continue his work. I think that he is, definitely needed in the Senate. Anyways, aside from my rambling, Casey's a good incumbent. Doug Mastriano has expressed interest in running for the Senate seat here. So has Dave McCormick. I think McCormick is more likely to be the nominee. I think he is more palatable. I think there's a chance Mastriano wins the nomination, and also Kathy Barnett declined. The Senate bid, which is funny. I put out like a little primary prediction for Pennsylvania in 2024 for the Senate seat, and it had Barnett as one of the free candidates. And then like the day after I post that, she declines. I'm just like, wow, that went well. Yeah. Anyways, Casey would beat either of them. He probably beat Mastriano by like, over 15 percentage points. I think he's a better candidate than Shapiro overall especially against Mastriano. The Casey name, is very popular in Pennsylvania, very well known. I think also McCormick, um, you know, he'd do significantly better than Mastriano, but he would still lose by like, high single digits, low double digits, at worst. So I don't think there's really much to worry about for Democrats in Pennsylvania. Now for the likely Republican states. Florida, first one, Rick Scott, he was a terrible NRSC chairman, but he's going to get reelected in Florida. Florida was just so bad for Democrats last year, and it won't nearly be as bad because of the turnout issue. The turnout issues won't be, as expressed. I guess in a presidential year, there will be, greater turnout because Joe Biden and Donald Trump will be on the ballot. So the turnout, percentages, I guess, from both parties won't be as lopsided towards the GOP. Stephanie Murphy, I think, is likely to run in this race. If she doesn't, there's really, no chance Democrats even make this remotely, competitive. I mean, likely technically is the category for remotely competitive, but as I said, some of these are really safe by probability, but likely by margin. Florida, Stephanie Murphy could, probably outrun Biden. I think right now Florida votes for Trump by 8 to 9 points. Probably votes for Scott 6 to 7. He's not a great candidate, but just with Florida's rightward shift, that's going to give him his first, multi-digit victory, because he hasn't been able to, or not multi-digit victory, but his first victory, his where he wins by over 1 percentage point, because he's always won by either less than one or just about one. So now Missouri, I was putting this off for a while because I was really, not that big on Josh Hawley being, super vulnerable, and he's not. He's not vulnerable. He's not going to lose. But I think that looking at the Senate race in 2022, Republicans couldn't even win that by a likely margin. Although I will say that the Senate seat, Eric Schmidt's Senate seat, is cursed. I will make a separate video about this, but for some freaking reason, it will just not vote for a Republican by a safe margin. I don't know what it is. It has been Republican for a longer time. The Class 1 Senate seat, this is Hawley's seat, was held by Claire McCaskill. But just for some reason, ever since 1986, when the seat, flipped for the, to the GOP and has stayed there since, it just will not vote for a Republican by a safe margin. And in 2022, I had it as safe red after Eric Schmidt won the GOP nomination. He wins it by 13. It wasn't shocking that that happened, but I think it shows that, I don't think Hawley is better than Eric Schmidt in terms of electability. Not much worse, but definitely not any better. And I think Lucas Kunce, he'll get a lot of money from Democrats. He won't come close to winning. He'll do well in the suburbs and the urban areas. But Hawley is practically safe because there's no way that Democrats are able to win in a state like Missouri. Those days are gone. And the final flip, or the final likely Republican state, is a flip. Is West Virginia. Now Joe Manchin has a relatively he has a good chance for a Democrat in West Virginia, but he is really between a rock and a hard place right now. He has, I think he made it clear sometime earlier in March, it was after my last prediction, that he's going to decide by the end of the year, in December of this year, on whether or not he's going to run in, the 2024 elections. Um, I really think that Republicans have this one in the bag as of right now. I think Manchin will do is significantly better than Biden or any person that the Democrats run for president. I think he only loses by around low double digits, maybe high single digits, which is pretty good for a Democrat. That's like a Bush margin in West Virginia. W. Bush, of course. But he's really unlike some other red state Democrats that we'll talk about in this video. Manchin really has had he had a lot of success prior to 2018 in terms of his margins of victory, and I think it shows the state's shift to the right. In 2010, of course, there was the special election to replace Robert Byrd, who had passed away. Manchin won that by 10. Now you could argue that this was inflated because he was up against John Race, who was a terrible candidate. I've read more about him recently, and he really seems like he dug himself, a grave, an electoral grave. Um, but still pretty impressive. Not good for a Democrat in West Virginia, but for the time, this was around the time, 2 years after McCain won the state by 13. So pretty impressive for Manchin. But it makes sense. He was the former governor. In 2012, he expands his margin of victory despite Obama losing the state by what was it, 27 points. So he did over 50 points better than Obama. Race was really really a bad candidate for this race. I just realized my joke there, haha. But yeah, point is, Manchin was doing well, like Jay Rockefeller, Robert Byrd, and the Democratic senators before them had done, in West Virginia historically. But then in 2018, a bluer year than 2012. You see Joe Manchin only win by 3. Now, yes, he was up against the Attorney General. I know that, a lot of red states were shifting to the right, that West Virginia is, but that's kind of my point here. I think Manchin, had a, relative to a Democrat relative to Hillary Clinton's performance in West Virginia in 2016, it was light years better. Of course it was. But considering the shift, and especially the fact that it was a bluer national environment, similar to the shifts in Indiana, Missouri, North Dakota, Florida, I think it shows that Manchin is really, having a hard time. And let's not forget that Manchin did not, unlike some of these other red state Democrats like, Joe Donnelly, Claire McCaskill, Heidi Heitkamp, Manchin voted to confirm Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. So I think that's, that really helped him because, there's evidence, in the polling data that things got worse for Democrats after, for a lot of red state Democrats, up for reelection in the Senate in 2018. A lot of them had, a much harder time winning after, they voted against, Brett Kavanaugh. Now, was that the same for, swing state Democrats? Not necessarily, but in these red states, yeah, it was not, a great idea. Now, you could say John Tester won, but, that and Sherrod Brown won, but they had pretty bad candidates too, and we'll get into those in a minute. But yeah, I think Manchin right now, definitely not favored to win. Maybe it's lean. Maybe Jim Justice doesn't run for Senate. I think he will, but again, that was a video. That was a joke. He's not actually announced yet. Although I am getting a little impatient. I was kind of my part of the joke that I wanted to put in there was that come on, dude, Justice. I'm not a big fan of you, but at least announce your decision yet, because it's getting to be a while. So yeah, we're on the waiting. We're playing the waiting game for Jim Justice, but really, I think any Republican would take it home. Would bring it back to the GOP. By over 5% at least. At least as of right now. So yeah, I think Democrats are gonna have they're gonna be disappointed by this one. Now we have seven remaining states. These are the truly competitive states. They'll be either lean or toss up. In terms of their competitiveness, these are the ones that I think have a realistic chance of going either way. Some of them are more, some of the lean states that we're about to get into are closer to likely, such as Michigan. Some of or potentially, I guess you could say Wisconsin or Nevada. But there are a lot of wild cards. There are a lot of question marks about these races, and these are the ones that are really going to be on the Senate map. I know some people might call Texas as likely, but personally, I don't think it's going to exceed that margin of victory. And so I think these seven states, Montana, Nevada, Arizona, Texas, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin. I think these right now are the true battlegrounds for the 2024 Senate elections. But again, not all battlegrounds are created equal, and we'll take out a couple of the obvious suspects, I guess, if you will. Texas. I don't think Ted Cruz is going to lose, but I do think he'll underperform Trump slightly. No matter what happens, he'll underperform DeSantis too. But I think Texas right now, Democrats, I think that a lot of people have given up on Texas trending blue simply because it doesn't really seem like it's happening. 2022, Democrats had a bad turnout in Texas. They lost the House popular vote by 20. They lost the governor's race by 11, despite having, a pretty good candidate in Beto O'Rourke. And in 2020, they had all of their, Trump surprised everyone when he won Texas by 5 times the amount some people thought he was going to win it by. Or, there were even some people that, said Biden actually was going to win Texas. But, here's the thing. If you look back at the presidential history, you can see at the beginning of the century, Bush won it by 21. Bush won it by in 2000. In 2004, it was 23 points against John Kerry. Then it goes to 2008. McCain still wins it by 12. That's less than, or that's more than even Trump's margin in 2016. Then go to 2012, Romney wins it by 16. Then in 2016, or wins it by 16. I don't know. I just kind of had like a brain moment. But yeah, in 2016, Trump does 7 points worse. He only wins it by 9. There's significant shifts against him in the suburbs. And that continues in 2020. Yes, I know a lot of people are going to say the Rio Grande Valley is shifting right. But I don't think it's going to be by 50 points, like it was in the last presidential election. I think, yes, Hispanics right now look like they're going to trend right, especially in, Miami, in Florida, specifically in Miami, and, somewhat in the Rio Grande Valley. But again, a lot of these Hispanic, voters really flock to, the incumbent president, the party of the incumbent president, and I think that gives Democrats a bit of room to, improve in the Rio Grande Valley, not in terms of margin, but just in terms of overall performance. I don't think that they're going, in terms of trends against them. I think right now, the best person for to run against Ted Cruz in this race would probably be, one of the Castro brothers, Julian or Hoquin. You could also run Colin Allred, or Allred. I'm not exactly sure how you say it. He's a congressman from up here in the Dallas, Fort Worth area. You could also run Lizzie Fletcher from Houston. Any of them I think would make it relatively close. I don't think there's much downsides to any of them, but I don't think any of them would beat Ted Cruz. I think that just as of right now, Texas is not ready to flip. It's coming. I think that the mere population size, when you compare the population of the urban and suburban areas to the Rio Grande Valley, it's like night and day. There are so many more people in the Dallas Fort Worth area than there are in Uvalde, Texas. Now, I probably shouldn't use that example. I'm sorry, that was a little insensitive, considering what happened there. But you get my point. There are a lot more people. More people means, more shifts in, bigger places in terms of population means more, more, a bigger shift in the overall state. And where are the suburbs trending? They're trending Democratic. Whereas the Rio Grande Valley, they're trending Republican. So I think it's going to hurt, this Rio Grande Valley, shift is going to hurt Democrats, but it's not going to hurt them to the point where they're never going to win Texas. It's just not right now. They're just not going to win it right now. And I think that that's my take on Texas. Cruz probably wins by three, maybe a little bit less. In Michigan, we'll talk about Michigan right now. This one, as I said, is closer to likely. It could be likely, honestly. Debbie Stabenow is obviously not running. I think, we've known that for a while. Alyssa Slotkin announced last month or in, end of February that she was going to run for the Senate seat. Looks like the field on the Democratic side is being cleared for her. And I really think she's going to be the Democratic nominee unless for some reason she, drops out, which, again, never say never, but not likely. Republicans, on the other hand, they have a bunch of candidates that that could potentially run. You have Bill Huizenga, the representative from Michigan's 4th congressional district, which is kind of like, the area where Fred Upton was a congressman from. You have Lisa McClain, who's kind of on the, eastern, on the eastern portion of the state, bordering, I guess it'd be Lake Huron. You have Peter Meyer, who, of course, former representative from Grand Rapids. I'm sure you all know about him. But either way, you have a lot of Republicans, but the state party, is pretty incompetent in Michigan. I think they're really, going to choose a Trump-like candidate. It really seems like Trump's influence over the party still, I guess, triumphs over, candidate quality. And I think, that was proven by the primary for the Wisconsin State Supreme Court election, in which Daniel Kelly, the more Trumpian, former justice of the Wisconsin Supreme Court, or just a justice, but he was kind of, a more right wing conservative justice. He was able to topple a more moderate Republican in that primary to advance to the general election. And, not saying that there isn't a chance that, the more establishment side of the GOP takes back, can run candidates in in this election cycle and win, but I'm just saying that it doesn't look likely right now. And Michigan has proven to us that it's, relatively pretty blue. It won't be a 10-point victory like it was for Gretchen Whitmer, or, won't be a 15-point victory, absolutely not for, like it was for, what's her name? uh the Jocelyn Benson, or was it? Yeah, it must have been. I think, yeah, because she was the Secretary of State. But either way, Michigan probably around a 5-point victory for Slotkin as of right now. She probably runs against Lisa McClain. I think that she would be, she's the most she's the most electable candidate in a primary. I think the most electable of these three would be Peter Meyer, but there's also potentially, James Craig, some other people, but of those three, I think, Huizenga would be also decent, but McLean really is the only one who I could see winning that primary. And if you don't win the primary, you don't get the chance to compete in the general election. Unless you run as an independent, although that might be illegal in Michigan, I'm not sure. Anyways, moving on to Nevada. Nevada, I really think that this state, it'll be competitive. I think that people saying that Nevada is never going to, Republicans have absolutely no chance of winning Nevada in 2024 or beyond. I think that's a little extreme. What I do think, it's a swing state. It voted for Biden by 2 points, voted for Hillary by 2 points. It was decent under Obama, but Obama was also a decent candidate. It was, a once in a lifetime candidate. Although I will say that I think Democrats are pretty clearly favored here. First of all, the GOP has, first of all, they have an incumbent. The Democrats do. Jackie Rosen, who was able to defeat a Republican incumbent, Dean Heller, in 2018 by over 5 points. That's already impressive enough. But when you also take into account the fact that Democrats did well in Nevada in, November of last year, despite pretty bad turnout, not like 2014, the 2014 midterms, but still relatively bad turnout. And if they were able to win the Senate race, and they only narrowly lost the governor's race, I thought that Lombardo would win by 2 to 3 against Sisolak. He only won by about a point and a half, and victory's a victory. There's also a governor's race, and I think that we need to recognize that. We need to, and I think Nevada has really, they've broken the GOP's heart so many times that I really don't see a reason to think that it won't again, unless something changes. So Nevada and also the GOP is really struggling to find a recruit. I think right now they're going to run Sam Brown or Rick Harrison, the television personality. He'd probably be the Dr. Oz of Nevada, to be honest. And Adam Laxalt, Brian Sandoval, Mark Amode, all of which would have been, at the very least acceptable candidates. Sandoval would have been pretty good, but he might have had trouble winning a primary. All of them have declined. So yeah, Nevada right now looking, like a 3-point victory for Jackie Rosen. Not too much, not too little. Typical for Nevada. In Wisconsin, this is our final lean D state. Tammy Baldwin looks like she's going to run for reelection. She says expects to run for reelection, or is planning to do so. Um, hasn't made a formal announcement, but still, she's probably running. She's not too old. She's only been there a couple in the Senate for only so long. But she is a pretty strong candidate. I don't think that she is absolutely like unbeatable. She did win in 2018 by 11 points, but she had a really bad opponent who really had no appeal to the rural base in Wisconsin. Did Baldwin did outperform Tony Evers in the governor's race by about 10 points in 2018, which is pretty impressive, but also Republicans had an incumbent in that gubernatorial race. So we'll keep that in mind. Baldwin's not going to win by 11 again, no matter what happens. But right now, it really looks like Wisconsin's, probably the most, the state with the biggest question marks out of any of these states. I think really Republicans could run anyone. Brian Steele has said that he has declined. It looks like he's going to run for reelection. He hasn't, he said that he plans to run for reelection. So, not a definitive no, not a hard no, but still doesn't look like he's going to run. He would have been a decent candidate. Scott Walker, the former governor of Wisconsin, probably not going to. Well, he said he's not going to run. You have a bunch of representatives. You have Rebecca Kleefich. I don't think Tim Michels would run again. He's not on this list. I think right now Mike Gallagher, the GOP representative from Green Bay, is the most likely challenger to Baldwin. I think he's really the only one that I could, the only one who hasn't declined, who's still, a potential candidate could beat Baldwin. Um, you know, but I think right now, Baldwin's still pretty strong. I think that, she would outperform Biden in, pretty much, in the Milwaukee and Madison area, as well as in the rural areas. Gallagher would probably do, he might overperform Trump in, say, Green Bay or Milwaukee, or in the WoW counties, the suburbs of Milwaukee, which, bring up a lot of the population. But if he is underperforming, Trump by, 5 points in some of these rural, what's it called, driftless area counties, that's also going to add up against him. So I think right now Baldwin wins by a narrow amount of around 2 points. I think that she keeps her seat and outperforms Joe Biden. Although she could lose again. Glean is not, safe by any means. Now we're down to the free toss-up states: Arizona, Montana, and Ohio. And as you can see, Republicans are at 50 Senate seats. Democrats at 47. They've already picked up one up from West Virginia. And if they win the presidency, they've already got the Senate because they got a Republican vice president to break a tie. But as of right now, I think Democrats are more likely to win the presidency, which means they have a path to winning the Senate as long as they win all three of these states, which is doable but hard. So as of right now, Democrats would have to win all three of the toss-ups to maintain control of the Senate. Republicans would have to win just one of the three to retake the chamber. As of right now, I think the easiest one for me to fill in right now is Ohio, and that would give the GOP the majority. Or that gives the GOP the majority. So yeah, if my prediction does come true, or is complete 100% accurate, the Republicans will take control of the Senate. They flip to Senate seats. Right now in Ohio, it's going to be a close race. Sherrod Brown is a very good candidate. He appeals to white working class voters. He appeals to all of the Democratic base while keeping, while also, having the ability to appear as less of a, typical Democrat. But I think the D in Ohio and, in some parts of the Rust Belt can be really toxic. I think, Sherrod Brown has been so effective in the past, and I think that he's going to, keep this close. He has a real chance of winning. But let's not forget 2018. It's not so much like the case of Joe Manchin where his margin, considerably shrunk in a bluer year. But what it was that he had a pretty poor candidate, pretty poor challenger as well, Jim Renacci. Originally looked like Josh Mandel was going to run, for this Senate seat he ran for it in 2012. He looked like he was going to run for it again in 2018, but then he dropped out of the race. Then Renacci jumped in, took the GOP nomination, and he really couldn't run a competent campaign. And by the end of it, Democrats looked like they were going to win this race by, at least, by low double digits. They only won it by 7 points, which is not much different than Brown's margin. It's only about a point larger than Brown's margin in 2012. And so I think, yes, Brown's victory is impressive, but I think a lot of, he should have won by more considering the circumstances, considering the the bad quality, or the bad candidate quality in Ohio that year. I think that really, helped his margin grow. I think that Renacci, he really did a lot worse than Trump in a lot of these rural white working class areas, which Brown was already doing well in. But as we've seen in 2022, Tim Ryan, who's probably the best candidate, best Democrat in Ohio to run, electability, who's the best Democrat in Ohio, electability wise, besides Sherrod Brown, of course. He lost by 6, and he did pretty well. Sherrod Brown's obviously going to outperform him, and right now, I think I would be comfortable keeping it as tilt just because we're so far away. We still have a lot to know. Brown is running for reelection, and he's going to get at least Matt Dolan. Matt Dolan could be the nominee. Right now, I think it's going to be Frank LaRose, who hasn't announced yet but has expressed interest. And I think, I think that Brown is going to be dragged down by the National Party. And I think, the fact that, with it being in a presidential year, I think that is going to bring him down, and narrowly by about a point, and unfortunately for him. So that is all I got to say about Ohio. In Arizona, I'm still unsure about this one, but I'm going to stick with Gallego winning. I think that his ability to appeal to independents, and keep Sinema from siphoning off a major portion of the Democratic vote, at least to the point where a Republican can win, it's impressive. And I think that, to be fair, I think Sinema's going to take away more votes from Gallego than he would from a Republican. I think right now the GOP nominee is most likely going to be Carrie Lake. But I think, she takes away more from him. But I also think that she takes away, a bit of or Cinema takes away votes from Gallego. Sorry, that's what I meant. But I think Cinema also takes away some votes from Lake. Maybe about 2%. So that, I think that my prediction right now, vote share wise would be 45 to 45, 45 for Gallego, 45 for Lake, and then will that be like around 10% for Cinema? So I think that she pretty much brings Gallego down a lot because I think he starts, from a higher ceiling. His vote share in a two-way race, is higher than Lake's. But I think overall it's not enough to sink him, and it seems like the independents are really not, buying it with Kirsten Cinema. They really don't seem to, be too enthused to vote for her, at least not enthused enough to elect, a Republican or even Cinema herself. So yeah, Arizona right now stays Democratic, narrowly, I guess technically flips Democratic if you're counting this by independent wise, but Cinema caucuses with the Democrats, so not a big deal. And finally, Montana. This one is definitely the biggest wild card of a race. It's a really, really competitive race. Jon Tester is a very good incumbent, but Republicans could really, pull their guy over the finish line if if whether it's Matt Rosendale, Ryan Zinke, or even Tim Sheehy, the former that businessman who's being recruited, and has the endorsement of, I think, who was the governor of Montana. So any of them would be, not terrible candidates. Well, actually, some of them would be bad, but considering the partisanship of the state, I really don't think that I really think that would be, would drag them over the finish line. Although Tester right now, he's a really popular senator. Last time I checked, he has a decent approval rating, and while he's going to be in a presidential year, he hasn't started out, his margin of victory, unlike Joe Manchin, hasn't really, dropped all that much, in between cycles. He did like what 0.1% worse against Matt Rosendale than he did against Danny Rayburg in 2012. Rosendale had a lot of issues, and with him trying to, he's really, put himself out to be more the MAGA side of the GOP. He was one of the people that voted against McCarthy. He's been really, really, Trumpian, very, very right wing, and I think that that works well, as long as it's not too extreme. And I think, against someone like John Tester, who already has who already has a lot of appeal to independents and some Republicans, I don't think that's enough to win. I think Rosendale right now is the nominee, and I think, Zinke would also lose, but probably by more because he seems to be an even bigger underperformer in his congressional seat. So as of right now, I think John Tester narrowly wins re-election by, like literally just, like maybe, a couple, maybe like 10,000 votes. Like it would be really close in the state of Montana. But yeah, that is what I have right now for my Senate prediction. I have Republicans retaking the chamber with 51 Senate seats, Democrats, holding 49. Republicans flip Ohio and West Virginia, while Democrats hold on to competitive seats in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Nevada, Arizona, and of course Montana. And of course, you talk about Texas with Republicans holding that, and Florida, Missouri, although Missouri not really that competitive, but I figured I'd put it, I'd put it out there. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hey, look, I called it. It's 40 minutes. But yeah, I guess that I got to stop talking about the safe states a lot more. Stop dwelling on some of the state safe states. Although I've like to dive into these races, and it really doesn't matter until we hit until we're like really close to the election, and we're still pretty far away. So I like to give some more in-depth analysis before then, but I will make some more videos so that I can kind of get my thoughts out there and not, drag on these videos. So thank you guys so much for watching the video. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the bell so you can, and turn on notifications, by hitting that bell, so you don't miss some more daily not daily content, but, some more of my content. But, yeah, thank you guys for watching. Check out my non-political channel, Interactor127, and my, comrades channel, Growling Zeus 666. And I'll see you guys next time when I talk about all things politics. See ya.